All right, in this section, we're going to look at the blue part of your rainbow review. So for this first one, it asks for the period of that function. So remember, we get that from looking to see what's being multiplied or divided by the x. And there's nothing multiplied or divided here, so that means it's not being stretched at all. So the period doesn't change, it's just 2 pi. But the amplitude, we get that from right here. So the amplitude would be 4. Okay, we wouldn't say -4 because the amplitude is just referring to the distance the graph is from the horizontal. And so it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, it's the same distance. So it's the absolute value, basically, of that number. All right, the phase shift, we get that from right here. Remember, we do the opposite of what happens to the x. So if you say -4 pi, that's fine. Or we could say 4 pi, and since it would be negative, that means it's being moved to the left. So you could say left 4 pi or -4 pi would be the same thing. And the vertical shift, we get that from what's happening after we do something with the x, so the -8. So that means, so if you put -8 there, that's fine. Otherwise, we could say it's 8 units down. Let's look at number 2. So this time we're given sine of 2x plus 6 pi. Now, look at this piece. Well, anytime we see something being multiplied by x, I want red flags, bells, and whistles to go off in your head. We need to change that. We need to factor that out. Because that represents after applying the distributive property. This is what we get. We want to undo the distributive property, otherwise our phase shift is going to be wrong. And so what I recognize is I need to factor out a 2 there. So whatever number is with the x, that's what you need to factor out. So when I factor out a 2, I'd be left with x plus 3 pi. And we have the -1. So for the period, we're going to look at this number here too. Remember, that's happening with the x. We would take the reciprocal of that, so that's going to be 1/2. So that means it's being shrunk to be 1/2 the size. Well, half of 2 pi would just be pi. So the period here would be pi. The amplitude, there's nothing being multiplied times a sine, so the amplitude is just 1. The phase shift is, well, what's happening right here. So we take the opposite of that, remember. So the opposite of plus 3 pi would be left 3 pi or -3 pi. Or so we could say 3 pi to the left or -3 pi. And the vertical shift would be -1, or if you said that it's going to move 1 unit down, would be fine as well. All right, let's look at number 3. It says, from the following graph, find the equation given that it is a cosine function and the a value is positive. Okay, so it's not being flipped over the x-axis. There's no flipping here. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where is that midline. Okay. Now there's a couple ways we could do that. We could find the distance between the maximum and minimum values. If you do that, we get that this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. Okay, so that's a distance of 8 units. So half of that is 4. So if we count up 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 would be right there. So that's where our midline is going to be. So that's really, really important. So I'm going to draw that midline in. Don't ignore that. There we go. Because that's going to help us figure out what the amplitude is. So before we do anything, let's find all those important pieces. So the amplitude now I can see is 4. The period is how long it takes to repeat itself. So this point here at 0 and this point, so that takes 2 pi for it to repeat itself. So the period would be 2 pi. This is for the cosine function. So the cosine function would have started here. And so there's 2 ways we could look at it. We could look at it as moving to the right pi units, or we could look at it as moving to the left pi units. So there's actually 2 ways we could. So let's just stick with the positive. We have enough negatives in our life, so let's focus on the positive. So the phase shift here would be that it's going to move to the right pi. The vertical shift is, there is none. It's not moving up or down. Well, actually, wait a minute. I'm sorry. It does move up. Because this distance from here to where our midline is 1 unit. I don't know what I was thinking there. So the vertical shift would be 1. So this is for the cosine function. So the amplitude is 4 times the cosine of our periods. It's still 2 pi, so it's not being stretched at all. So there's no number to multiply here times the x. But we're moving it to the right pi unit. So I would say x minus pi. And then plus 1. If you had plus pi there, that would also work. So either of those would be the correct answer. All right, so that is the blue section. So hopefully that answers the questions you had. And good luck as you continue to review.